Hello guys, and you're welcome. So in this tutorial, I'll show you how you can create and set up this peeling paint effect in Substance Painter. So let's go ahead and begin. So the first thing I'll do is to start a new project. I'll just go to File, click on New, and what I'll do is, I'll go to File, Open Sample, and I'll click on discard just to discard the settings. And what I want to do is to click on Meet Matte and click open. This is going to let us open up a default Painter project that has a 3D model with the texture sets built into this model. So if I click on the texture set settings and scroll down, you can actually see I have these built in textures already automatically generated for us. So this saves a little extra time, and also if you don't have your own model you want to work with, you can actually have this and start experimenting with this model. It has good UVs and good topology, and it's good to go. So what I'll do is to get rid of the base and body, and we'll just focus on the head, and make sure you've selected the head so that anything we're doing is going to be affected by that layer only. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a series of textures gradually from bottom, and we'll start adding our complexity all the way to the top. So first of all, let's just create a layer group. So I'll just delete this guy and click on this group folder right here. So I can create a layer group, and I'll just call that group base color like so, and I'll just hit the return key to create a base color. So next what I'll do is to click over here to the fill effect, and I'll add a fill, and I'll just add two of these because I'll like to have some slight variation of the colors I'm using. So for the fill at the bottom, I'll just go over here and click on color, and what you can do is if you only want the color channel, you could just hold on Alt and click color, and you're going to be only working with color channel. I don't want any of the other materials to affect this object. So for the base color, I'll just click this tone right here, and I'll just turn this off just to show you that this is the tone we've selected. Right, so we'll just select something, say here, and the hex value I'm using is EFE7E4 for the fill layer at the bottom and the fill layer at the top. Notice if I make it on and make it visible, it's going to override what's at the bottom. That's super simple. All we need to do is just drag this slider down so we can see the color at the bottom as well. So we'll just mix this to about halfway so that they'll have a 50-50% mix. So here as well, I just only want to affect the color channels. I'll click Alt and click, and I don't have a material selected, so I'll just click on this guy and click on this as well, and just drag this slightly up just so I can have a slight variation of that. It might not be noticeable, but that's super great because it's good and important for us to kind of like have these slight changes. So next for this one, I'll just open up the hex value. I'm using ECE0CD in case you want to follow along and use the same hex value I'm using. So this is our base color right here. So what I'm going to do is to add another base color right on top of it so that we can add some slight complexity to this object right here. So for the next base color, what I'll do is to just add a fill layer above this one. So I'll just go over here and click on my fill layer, and you can actually notice it's putting it underneath. So what I want to do is to make sure it's above, and to do that is simple. Make sure you click on the object content above and then click on the add fill. And okay, this is just drag this and just drop this right here, or I'll just put it in the same group. And let's see what's going on here. So I simply just want this to be on top of this. I don't know why it's acting strangely. So again, sorry, 1 second. Click on this fill and click on add fill. Alright, so for some reason it's not part of this. Okay. Alright, so let's just keep on working and I will actually fix that issue. So I have this fill layer. So what I want to do is to create a mask. So I'll add a, let's first create a hex value for this. And I'll click on this and I'll pick something slightly, slightly dark like that. I think that's a good value. So I'm using CBB68E. That's CBB68E, and I'll add a black mask to this object. And what I want to do next is to add a generator to this just to simulate some dust. So I'll click on here, add the effect, and I'll click on add generator, and under the generator category, what I want to search for is dripping rust. So I think it's this one. That's the dripping rust, and I'll just click on that, and you can see it gives us a very nice kind of like a texture around. And what we can do right now is to just start adding slight details over here, just slight details, nothing too complicated. So I'll click the dripping rust, and you can see the properties here. Now for some reason, if you see your properties over here, let me just reset the UI so I can show you why your properties is not where mine is, and I'll show you how you can set that. So I just reset the UI. So to have the 3D view only, I'll press F2 to have my 3D view only. And what I'll do is to just, this is where your properties are. I just like having mine on the left side with the assets so they can share the shelf together, just to give a little space here. So here under the properties, I'll just left click and hold and drag it till the assets tab becomes blue, and I'll just release that. So now I can jump over to assets and I can click on the properties, and it just gives me a nice clean space where I can work with this object and just kind of like create what I want to create. Right, so it just gives you that smooth, kind of like environment where you could just create what content you want to create. So that's going to be it for this one. So let's go ahead and just add that dripping rust effect. And what I'm going to do is just drag this up a little bit, and I'm going to slide down the rust contrast and just kind of like spread it and leave it over here in this direction. So what I also want to do is to set this to, let's see, over here, the fill, the projection. I just want to set this to a triplanar projection and click on this, because honestly, triplanar make this, it makes this look, kind of like better already. So that's one. So, and also another thing I like to do is to add in some of these texture effects, like so. Right, so that's how this is looking right now. Nothing too serious, nothing too complicated, like that. We can do things like change the tiling, but I'll just leave it at the default value. Just set the tiling to 1. So what we're going to do is just quickly rename this guy. So I'm just going to call this base color 2, like so. And what I'll do is just create a group, and let's just call this base setup. Oops, I think I used a typo. I'll call this base setup. So here we have our base color, and we have our base setup, like so. Right, so what I'm going to do again is to duplicate this base color so I can have a variant of it. So I'll just go ahead here and just drag this down just a little bit to have slightly that effect, and I'll hold down shift and right click just to drag the lights around to see what we're doing, and I'll just zoom in a little bit, and quickly I'm going to increase my sample points to at least 64 points just to have a fair amount of detail in our engine. So next what I'm going to do is simply duplicate this layer. So I'll right click and say duplicate layer, and under this duplicate I've created, I'll just go to the dripping rust. So here we have it at 52. So here I'm just going to go to my dripping rust and just set this slightly to like 100, and I'll change some of the things like the rust spread. I'll just drag this down a little bit, and I'll just increase the intensity of those drips, and then turn up the smoothness a bit, just so that we can have a slight variation. And here for the color as well, I'll just make this slightly darker so that it looks kind of like dirty. So this is what we have, and this is what we're having right now on top, just to have a slight variation. And the hex value is 92F886F. That's sorry, 95886F. Wow, that wasn't so hard, was it? So that's it. So we have the our base setup, we have our base color, a fill, and then we have this. So let's still drag this down a bit so we don't have 100% of anything here. I'll just drag this down as well, and also lower that so we don't have 100% of everything set up right there. So another thing I also like to do is to add a fill layer right above it, and let's just vary that base color. We have that effect we have. Let's just vary that. Again, that's just to add some nice variation to this. So here I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate this layer, and what I'll do is to make this color more dark. So I'll click on this and head over towards the red, and I'll just drop this down a bit like so to make this super dark. And because it's on 64, we can't see that, so I'll just set this up to like 82, and the hex value I'm using is 795949. 795949. That's the hex value I'm using right here. And I think with this I can safely say, hey, I'm done with the base setup like so. So if we just get rid of this, we can see what's happening. And if we turn this off as well, we can see that additional detail we have on this object. So what I'm going to do is to drag in a basic smart material. So I'll just open this right here and I'll click on this, and let's look for a smart material. Let's look for a basic plastic glossy, and I'll just drag in the plastic glossy layer like so. I'll just drag this and place it up here, and this is going to be on top, and it's going to override what we have right here. What I basically want to do with the plastic glossy is to just have access to this slight bump we can see on this object right here. And what I'll do is to click on this and set the mode to multiply so we can see through the content we have underneath. And what I'll do is to go over to the base color. If I go back to the properties fill, I'll just go ahead and set this to a slightly light value like so. Now this might be this effect might be super much, so what I want to do is to just reduce some of these grunge amounts and just slide down this effect. And so eventually, if I even want, I might actually get rid of this layer, but just to have some of that texture going through this layer. Alright, so now that we've done with plastic glossy, what we're going to do is to drag in our material effects and just put it over here. So I'll go over to the assets, and you can see under here, if you type matte FX, you'll find the peeling paint under the filters category. So what I'll do is just click and drag until I see a white icon appear above here, and then release that. So you'll see a white plus appear, and you can actually see what's happening right here. So you have this peeling paint effect, but what we're going to do is to kind of like, change some of those properties for that fill effect. What we could also do is to add some specific layers to this fill so that we can enhance how this fill kind of like looks like. So the first thing I'll do is to add a generator. So I'll click here and add a white mask, and underneath I'll click on that mask and I'll go under effects and I'll add a generator right here. And the generator I'm going to look for is the dirt, so it's just right here. So I'll click on dirt, and this kind of like hides the effect we had underneath with our peeling paint. So what we actually do is to go over to the dirt generator and then start changing some of those things. So let's see the parameters, and we can start kind of like lowering some of these like so. I'll just drag the contrast, the dirt contrast, so we still have some of that effect showing right there. If I drag this, we can actually see it, but if I turn this up, we can see some of this like there, like so. So this is going to add just slight effects and details to this object here. And we'll also set the grunge amount so we can see some of that grunge coming back in this object like so. Alright, so I think that's going to be it for the for the dirt. So what we can also do is to add like a bevel on this layer. So I'm just going to go over here, and this time around it's going to be a filter. So let's click on the filter, and what we'll search for, and let's click on this to reset our filters. And what we just want to look for is a bevel. And what we're going to do is to change the corner type to angular. So you can actually see it gives it this kind of like flaky look, right? So it gives it this kind of like flaky effect. I don't know if you can see this, but if I set this back to say round, and if I set this to angular, like this is the effect we get when we set this to angular like that. It just helps to give it some kind of like nice effect right there. And what we can do is just play around with the distance and see how far or how near we want to set that to. I believe I'll just set it to here, 0.04 or 0.03 is fine. So I'll just leave it at this value. What we can also do is to just add another filter, and this time around let's search for the sharpen. I'll just start searching for SHAR. So I'll just add a sharpen filter to this, and the intensity I'll just drag it down a little bit just to give this some extra kind of like bump to this object. And for now I believe I can call this just by adding this very basic effect. You can actually see what we have going on right here. We actually have a nice kind of like setup that is super cool and awesome. So what we can do to add a little bit, now this part is not really a must, but we can actually add a little bit more to this. So let's go over here to our assets, and here under the filters, let's look for metal, let's look for galvanized, matte finish galvanized, and we could just drag this here and place it at the top. Now like I said, honestly it's not a must, but what this does is to kind of like break off the surface, and we can actually see this is too super glossy for what we want to do, right? This is super glossy, too glossy actually. So but if we go to the properties, we can do a lot of things like adjust the scale, like that. So I don't think that's a good effect, and sometimes you might experiment and try some of these effects and see which ones are nice, right? So if I turn off that, we can actually see what it's doing. So if it's something you want, I can see it's making it slightly add a little bit of noise on our surface. So it's all about kind of like turning it down, toning it down, just to make sure you don't have too much of it, and then also setting a blend mode that might not really affect the object, like so. And then what I also like doing is to add a final layer on top that's going to kind of like add into that final effect, just to give an additional kind of like texture to this object right here. And also, if on our plastic glossy, let's see if we added a so let's add, we actually forgot to add a little one here on our plastic glossy. So I believe we can add something to make this super awesome. So under our plastic glossy, let's add a mask. Let's add a black mask under plastic glossy. And what we can do is to bring in some effects. So let's go ahead and click on add generator, and I'll just bring in the metal edge wear. So I believe it's somewhere very close here. I think I'm even seeing this. So let's just search for metal edge wear, and I'll just click on that. And this will also add some level of wear on the surface. So you can also play with that and see what kind of details you want to add. Let's just turn up the contrast a little bit and bump up the grunge amount, and we'll just leave it at that, so we don't want to overwork our system. So that's something I forgot to add. You can always add these effects and change them anytime you feel like changing them. That's super awesome. So like I said, what we're actually going to do next is to add a texture overlay on this guy. So I'll just go over here and click on this guy and create a new group, so I can start adding things to this folder right here, which we just created. So to do that, what I like to do is to add a edgeware effect, and this edgeware is going to be like the fiberglass edgeware. I think that's a very nice effect to add on an object. So let's go ahead and just let's add that to our design right here. So what I'll do is to quickly create a fill layer, and this is part of this group, and I'll just call this group texture overlay. So I have my fill layer. So with the fill layer selected, what I'm going to do is to add a black mask. So add a black mask. So with that, black mask is hiding everything. So I'll go over here and add a generator, and I'll search for let's reset that first, and I'll search for fiberglass, and I'll click on the fiberglass generator like so, and let's just zoom in and see what's happening. So you can actually see it's actually adding slight hatch tones, like hashes on this. So this is without it, this is it on, this is it off. It's adding some of that little hash settings here, cross hatching. And what I'll do is to set this projection to triplanar project, and what I'll do is to also change this value and just give it some slight greenish tone like so. It's super I believe I'm on the wrong. Okay, yeah, good, that's it. So let's just slightly make this kind of like bright like so, so we can actually see some of that effect here. And what I'll do is to also kind of like lower this, right, so we don't really get to see much of it, but it's just there and it's adding this extra layer of effects on it. And what we can do is to duplicate this layer. So I'll go and say duplicate layer, and what I'll do is to just go over here to the color channel only, and let's just drag this and kind of like change this gradually. And hopefully you can see some of these effects we've had here. So we had some dust, we had some grime. We can actually see more of that at the back. And if this is super too much, what we can do is to always, you know, kind of like dial this down a bit, and also come over here and dial this down a bit, just to have, you know, few of that effect. And what we can do is to use another blend mode to pass through our objects. So that's how you can have a slight, like kind of like textured paint peeling effect. And remember, we have a lot of parameters. You can always go back to change those parameters you have, just to make, you know, the object stand out and make it super. We can even do things like turn on the bevel wrap on our object, and like I said, we can even add some more smoothing to the object. And finally, if you want to save this as a oops, I actually nuked that effect right there, so I'll just go ahead and go back to my assets. If you want to for instance, again, if we look at the body and the base, we only have this effect on the head of this object, and we're actually not seeing that effect on the foot of our mesh. So to fix that issue, it's very straightforward. To fix that, all we need to do is to right click on this. I'll just go over here and click, or let's create a group, and let's get back over here on our base color, and we can right click and say instantiate across texture sets, and it knows which texture sets to instantiate this around. So we'll just do that the same thing here, instantiate across texture sets, and click on this, And we'll go over to our Matte FX Peeling Paint. Right click and say instantiate across texture sets. So it's going to instantiate across the body and base, and each time we click on instantiate across texture sets, you can actually see this white icon here is just telling you that whatever effect you have here is actually being passed through the other texture sets. And I'll click on this matte finish galvanized and instantiate across texture sets as well, the body and the base. And finally, for our texture overlay, I'll still do the same thing and instantiate across texture sets as well. Alright, so now that we've done with the entire material set, to create a smart material, the first thing we need to do is to group everything together. If we select a specific group, for instance, if we're on our texture overlay group, and I'll also show you a nice trick on how to kind of like make these groups stand out. So for instance, this is my base color group. If I right click, I could just use a color set. Like here, I'll just use this to kind of like organize the layers, so I'll know which of these layers I'm working on. It's not a must, but all it does is just to help you kind of like have some nice way to organize your layers. And this is it. So if I open this group, for instance, you actually see this orange group. These sub items in this group, or the children in this group, are also going to be orange. It just helps to let you know where you are. And also, to finally create our smart material, we need to put everything in a group. So the first thing I'll do is to click on this group, and I'm just going to call this final. My caps is on. I'll just say final peeling paint. So this is going to be our group, and it's going to be above everything else. And what I'll do is to quickly select, I'll hold down shift and select all our groups and items. So now I've selected all these. What I'll do is just to okay, I have old peeling paint. I'll use control to hold that as well. So now I've selected all these. I'm going to left click and hold and then drag them into this folder and release. This is going to drag all our layers and our groups and then put them all together into one folder called the final peeling paint. So if I close this group and turn this off, you can actually see I've turned this off on the head layer as well. So let's go ahead and see how we can kind of like use this. So if I go back to the head group, to the head shader, sorry, and I close this and right click, what I can do is to instantiate this across the entire texture set. So I'll right click and say instantiate across texture set, the body and the base. So I'll click OK to instantiate that. And if I actually see this, it means this texture set has been instantiated like I explained. And then finally, when this is done, what I can do is to create a smart material from this group. So I'll just right click and I'll just go to create smart material. Now it's called final peeling paint. So if we go to our assets, and I'll just go here and maximize this view for our smart materials. And this is just a setup I like using. I'll just turn this to medium so we can see this. And then if I'm on the smart material layer, so if I kind of like go down right here, we should actually see our final peeling paint. So let's search for it. So let's close this, and we are on smart materials. So let's search for final peeling paint, and there we go. We have our material here. If I turn on the list, we can see final peeling paint smart material. And what that means is we could just easily drag this into any other project, not just this project, and we can reuse this material and then open up those settings because they're going to be available for us to use, and then we'll actually keep on reusing them. So that's how you can create a smart material. You can even layer them and scent or change the blend mode into something else, so you can actually see how that has that effect on your design. So quick ways of adding very funny and fun effects. So you can see that right here. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next lesson.